When a man is falling for you but refuses to admit it, to you or even to himself, you'll often see it first in the way his behavior shifts. And the irony is, it's rarely a smooth shift. It's not the straight line logic that we like to imagine attraction follows. Instead, it becomes a kind of emotional tug-of-war that plays out in small, almost imperceptible moments. One day he feels confident, even bold, drawn toward you without hesitation. The next day he pulls back, suddenly reserved, almost guarded. Not because you did something wrong, not because his feelings changed, but because his feelings are stronger than he ever planned for. This inconsistency is not confusion, it's conflict. A conflict between desire and fear. Between what he feels and what he thinks he should feel. Between the part of him that wants to move closer and the part of him that's terrified of what that closeness requires. Attraction that happens slowly is easy. Attraction that hits him deeply is disruptive. It shakes the routines he built to protect himself. It challenges the emotional systems he's relied on. It forces him to face the very thing he's spent years trying not to feel too much of: vulnerability. And when a man isn't prepared for vulnerability, he doesn't always respond with honesty. He responds with hesitation. He responds with mixed signals, not because he wants to play games, but because he's wrestling with emotions that feel bigger than him. He might text you first on a day when courage wins, and then go silent when anxiety takes the wheel. He might seem fully present when he's with you, but then overthink every moment afterward. To you, it feels inconsistent. To him, it feels like survival. You see, falling begins long before admitting. A man can be deeply moved by you, your presence, your energy, your kindness, and still not know what to do with the weight of that feeling. So he tries to regulate it. He tries to take a step back so he can regain a sense of control. But the truth is, the pull toward you is still there. Every withdrawal is temporary. Every pause is him trying to steady himself. Every moment of silence is him trying to make sense of why someone like you affects him in ways no one else has. And if you're not careful, you might misinterpret this emotional turbulence as a lack of interest. But it's often the opposite. Men who don't feel much stay consistent. Men who feel deeply struggle to maintain their composure. The more intense the attraction, the more he will oscillate between leaning in and stepping back. Not because he's unsure about liking you, but because he's unsure about what loving you might demand of him. This is why self-awareness on your part is essential. Instead of reacting to every shift, you learn to recognize the pattern for what it is, not a sign to chase him, and not a sign to abandon your worth, but a reminder to stay grounded in your own value as he figures out his emotional landscape. Because at the end of the day, a man who is truly falling for you will sort out his conflict. Attraction that disrupts him eventually becomes attraction he cannot deny, and the moment he stops fighting it and starts choosing it, that's when everything becomes clear. So don't rush to decode the inconsistency. Sometimes it's not a red flag, it's the beginning of something real. When a man is falling for you but won't admit it, he often gives himself away in the quiet ways he pays attention. Not the obvious compliments, not the dramatic gestures. Those come later, when he finally feels safe enough to show his hand. The real clues are subtle, almost fragile, and they slip out when he thinks no one is watching. Because when he cares, even secretly, he notices things about you that most people overlook. And those details become the map he follows back to you again and again. What's interesting is that attention in this context is not passive. It's not just him seeing you, it's him studying you. It's the way he remembers how you take your coffee without ever writing it down. It's the way he notices the slight shift in your tone and knows you've had a rough day without you saying a word. It's how he catches the small things you try to play off, the little quirks, the subtle behaviors, the emotional cues others miss, and he doesn't point it out to impress you, he simply absorbs it, because the mind pays close attention to what the heart is quietly choosing. Most men don't consciously decide, let me notice every detail about her. That level of awareness doesn't come from effort. It comes from impact. You impact him. Your presence creates a level of emotional stimulation that draws his focus naturally. Even if he's trying to act casual, his attention gravitates toward you because his body and mind respond before he gives himself permission to. Attraction is not a strategy. It's a pull. And that pull makes him alert in ways he doesn't fully understand. But here's where it gets psychologically layered. A man who hasn't admitted to himself that he's falling often tries to hide how much he notices. He'll catch your new hairstyle, your new outfit, your shift in mood, but he won't always comment on it. He doesn't want to reveal how tuned in he actually is. So instead, you see it in micro behaviors, the lingering glance when you laugh, the quick check to see your reaction after he says something, the way he positions himself to be within your line of sight, even if he pretends he's not paying attention. These actions look accidental, but they're not. They're instinctive. Human beings don't track what doesn't matter to them. We don't observe deeply unless we feel deeply. And when he's falling, you become part of his internal world in a way that changes how he processes everything around you. You'll notice that he references things you said weeks ago, or that he subtly adjusts his choices because he knows your preferences, or that he picks up on emotional patterns you didn't expect anyone to see. That's not coincidence. That's emotional investment disguised as casual awareness. And let's be honest, this kind of attention is one of the most powerful indicators of attraction because it's voluntary. He could choose not to notice. He could choose to stay detached, but he doesn't. His mind keeps returning to you, and attention reveals the truth long before confession does. So pay close attention to where his attention lingers. It will tell you everything his words haven't said yet. There's a moment in every growing connection where his behavior contradicts the image he's trying to project. He wants to appear unfazed, in control, untouched by emotion, but his actions reveal a certain protectiveness he can't quite suppress. And it's subtle, not the dramatic, sweeping gestures that movies exaggerate. It's the small, instinctive moves he makes without thinking, the ones that show his care before he's ready to name it. What many people misunderstand is that protectiveness isn't always physical. Sometimes it's emotional, sometimes social, sometimes purely perceptual. It shows up in the way he subtly watches out for your comfort in a group setting, how he pays attention to the dynamics around you, or how he steps in not boldly, but thoughtfully when he senses you're uneasy. These moments are not random. They're markers of emotional investment emerging from beneath the surface. A man who's falling for you, especially one trying to hide it, often becomes hyper, aware of your well-being. It's not about controlling you, it's about caring in a way he hasn't fully admitted to himself. You'll see it in the way he positions himself slightly closer when the environment feels uncomfortable, in how he checks whether you've made it home safely, almost as if sending that message is a reflex rather than a decision, in how he listens carefully when you talk about something that bothers you and, without making a big deal of it, quietly makes choices that ease your path. There's a psychological reason for this. When someone's presence begins to matter to us, our protective instincts activate long before our conscious mind catches up. Attraction doesn't just awaken desire, it awakens responsibility. Even if he's trying to seem emotionally neutral, his behavior betrays a deeper pull. Your comfort affects his emotions more than he wants to admit. You'll notice it in conversations too. He becomes alert when you mention someone who hurt you. His tone shifts, not dramatically, but enough that you feel the weight of his concern. He may not voice everything he thinks, often because he's afraid of revealing too much, but his silence in those moments is charged with emotion. That quiet, almost guarded protectiveness is one of the clearest signs he's invested on a level he's not prepared to articulate. And here's where it gets interesting. A man who isn't interested doesn't concern himself with how you're doing. He doesn't track your emotional ups and downs. He doesn't adjust his choices to make your life smoother. But a man who feels something, especially one who's not ready to admit it, shows it in these micro moments. The small things he does to shield you from discomfort, the way he anticipates your needs before you mention them, the subtle way he stands up for you even when you're not in the room. This kind of protectiveness is not about possession, it's about presence. It's his heart stepping forward even as his mind tries to hold back. It's his care leaking through the cracks of his composure. So when you see these quiet acts of protection, don't dismiss them as coincidence. They are the emotional tells of someone whose feelings have already outrun his words. Because in the end, the way a man protects what he values always reveals the truth he's not ready to speak. There's a moment in every developing connection where his emotional guard begins to slip, not in a dramatic confession, but in something far quieter, vulnerability, and the fascinating part is that he rarely notices it happening. He thinks he's keeping things cool, staying in control, maintaining his distance. But when a man starts to fall for someone, there are these subtle cracks in his armor where his real self begins to show. It usually starts with the small disclosures. He tells you something about his past that he doesn't share casually. He lets you in on a frustration he's been carrying, or a dream he's still afraid to name out loud. And he doesn't present these things with a polished, rehearsed version of himself. Instead, it comes out unfiltered, almost accidental, like he suddenly forgot that he wasn't supposed to reveal anything personal. Those are the moments he gives himself away without realizing it, because vulnerability isn't always a grand emotional reveal. Most of the time, it's something simple. He lets you see the parts of him he normally protects. And men guard those parts fiercely. They're taught from a young age to hold their weaknesses close, to show competence, strength, control. Vulnerability is something earned, not given lightly. So when he allows you to see even a glimpse of his internal world, that's not casual. That's emotional investment sneaking past his defenses. You can often feel the shift before you can name it. There's a different tone in his voice when he opens up. A hesitation not because he doesn't want to share, but because sharing matters. He becomes visibly aware of your reaction, almost like he's checking whether it's safe to continue. He may even laugh it off or quickly change the subject afterward, trying to cover the fact that he let himself go too deep. Another indicator is when he starts involving you in his struggles, not just his victories. Men don't do that unless they feel something substantial. Anyone can talk about plans, ambitions, and surface-level frustrations. But talking about disappointment, fear, uncertainty, that's a different layer altogether. It means he trusts you, or at least he wants to. It means your presence is creating enough emotional safety that he's willing to risk being seen. And sometimes vulnerability appears as emotional transparency rather than emotional confession. He reacts more honestly around you. His face shows what he's feeling before he has time to hide it. His frustration, his jealousy, his admiration, they leak through more easily. He's less guarded because his emotions are no longer things he can fully control in your presence. What you're witnessing in those moments is the early architecture of intimacy forming, long before he's prepared to acknowledge it out loud. Vulnerability is the place where attraction starts evolving into connection. It's where interest deepens into something meaningful. So when you see those glimpses, those unexpected moments when he lets down his guard, don't underestimate them. His vulnerability isn't a mistake. It's the subconscious truth surfacing despite his attempts to stay composed. Because ultimately, a man's willingness to be seen is the clearest sign that his heart has already chosen where it wants to go. There's a particular kind of tension that builds when a man is falling for someone but isn't ready to admit it, even to himself. It shows up not necessarily in what he says, but in how his energy shifts around you. You can feel it in the way he becomes hyper, aware of your presence, how he pays attention to the smallest details of your interactions, and how his behavior subtly recalibrates around the possibility of something deeper forming. This isn't intentional, it's instinctive, it's the pull of emotional gravity revealing itself. You'll notice this most clearly in the moments when he tries to maintain that casual facade. He'll tell himself he's keeping it cool, but his actions contradict him. He mirrors you without realizing it. Your tone, your rhythm, your expressions. Psychologists call this attunement, and it's one of the strongest indicators of interest. He tunes into you the same way someone listens carefully to a song they can't get out of their head. Even his posture changes. He leans in a little more, turns his body toward you, or positions himself near you in group settings without consciously planning it. These micro shifts happen because his emotions are already involved, even if his mind is still catching up. And then there's the way he responds to your attention. A man who is indifferent doesn't react to how you speak to him, how you look at him, or how close you stand. But a man who's quietly falling will feel every bit of it. He'll get tongue-tied in the moments he wants to appear confident. He'll overthink things he would normally ignore. And sometimes he'll retreat, not because he's not interested, but because he's overwhelmed by how much he is. That push-pull dynamic is a classic internal struggle. His desire to move closer battling with his fear of what that closeness might mean. Another layer of this shift is emotional sensitivity. Not sensitivity in the dramatic sense, but in the subtle ways he becomes more reactive to you. Your praise affects him more deeply than you realize. Your disappointment hits harder than he expected. He finds himself caring about your opinion, not just of him, but of the choices he makes and the person he's becoming. That level of emotional responsiveness doesn't happen casually. It happens when someone has already begun to place value on the connection. One of the clearest indicators is how he handles other people around you. When a man is falling, he becomes more protective, more attentive, and sometimes more quietly territorial, not in a possessive way, but in that instinctive awareness of wanting to stand out to you. He'll try to be the one who makes you laugh. He'll make sure you feel supported, and when someone else commands your attention, he'll feel that flicker of jealousy he tries so hard to hide. What's important to understand is that all these signs emerge before words do. Attraction is the spark, but emotional investment is the shift, and that shift is almost always visible first through behavior. By the time a man starts acting differently around you, he's already feeling more than he's willing to admit out loud. And that's the part to remember. Actions don't lie, even when people do it unintentionally. When his energy changes, it's because his heart has already moved, even if his words haven't caught up yet. There's a moment in every connection where a man gives himself away without even realizing it. Not through a grand gesture, not through a love confession, but through the way he keeps finding reasons to stay in your orbit. This is one of the most subtle yet powerful signs that he's falling for you, even if he hasn't acknowledged it consciously. People don't consistently gravitate toward what doesn't matter to them. He shows you his investment not by saying, "I'm thinking about you," but by showing up in ways that reveal he can't stay away. You'll notice it in the way he keeps reaching out, even when there's nothing specific to say. He'll send something small, an inside joke, a random observation, a quick comment on something you posted, because the real purpose isn't the message itself, it's the connection it creates. This isn't about communication. It's about proximity. Emotionally, he wants to feel close to you, and these micro moments are his way of maintaining that closeness without exposing the depth of his feelings too soon. There's also a consistency to his presence that's hard to ignore. Even if he tries to play it cool, his patterns tell the truth. He checks in. He remembers details you assumed he forgot. He circles back to conversations you started days ago. And here's the interesting part. He does it even when he's busy, tired, or stressed. A man who's indifferent disappears in those moments. A man who's falling finds a way to stay connected, because you're not just another task on his list. You're the part of his day that gives him energy, not drains it. Another subtle layer is the way he creates shared moments, sometimes without even framing them as intentional. He invites you into his world piece by piece. Maybe he sends you a song he wants you to hear, or he shows you something he's working on, or he brings you into the things he values, his goals, his frustrations, his hopes. He's opening the door, not wide enough to call it vulnerability, but enough to let you peek into the parts of himself he doesn't show everyone. That instinct to include you is emotional exposure in disguise. And then comes the interesting shift. He starts letting the future slip into conversation. Not in the dramatic, "where is this going?" way, but in small references, events he wants to go to, plans he hints at, things he imagines doing that somehow include you. He may not say, "I want you there," but the fact that you appear in his future thoughts without effort is a sign of internal alignment. His mind is already placing you in the long-term picture, even if he hasn't verbalized it yet. What ties all of this together is intention. Quiet, consistent, unspoken intention. When a man keeps finding reasons to stay connected, when he chooses presence over distance, when he invests in the small things that build emotional familiarity that isn't casual. That's a heart moving towards something it doesn't yet know how to articulate. And here's what matters most. When someone's actions continually pull them back to you, believe the pull. Words can be delayed. Fear can slow him down, but behavior, steady, persistent, unforced behavior, always reveals the truth.